You are now watching People's Opinions on Popular Topics.
Well, to be honest, not really right now.
Frogger, I hear, is the latest when I listen to the radio.
Yeah, he's definitely out.
I started the 7th of last month protesting.
What's your first name and where are you from?
I'm Samantha and I'm from here, Ottawa. I offer $100 signings, which is unheard of. Like in the city, the average price is $250 just to sign. Not even anything pretty or cute. You know what I mean? So this lady was like, "You shouldn't be offering this for $100." Blah blah blah. I'm like, firstly, I'm not making millions of dollars from this. People are not knocking my door down. I'm like, but secondly, I'm like, how many people lost money this year or lost out or whatever? Or you know what? Maybe one person lost a job, but they have enough money, and now they can have a baby. And someone doesn't have to go to work, but they can't afford a $10,000 wedding. You know what I mean? Come sign your papers, have your baby, enjoy your life, don't worry about it. You know what I mean? You don't have to do the craziest parts.
Yeah.
I feel strongly that all people's language speaks to other ears, and you know, whatever story comes out that someone hears, they might be like, wow, I'm not the only person who felt that way or was like that or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's not about becoming popular and having like a trauma story out there to write a book. It's more like, hey, yeah, me too. You know what I mean? So you're not alone in this world. It's cool. You don't have to be my friend to know that you are not the only person experiencing that in the world.
What's your first name and where are you from?
I'm Samantha and I'm from here, Ottawa.
And I heard you grew up in Vanier when it had a bad reputation. Could you tell me more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Vanier has a long reputation, and it sort of started in the 60s, but I'm an 80s baby. And as I was growing up, Vanier was still its own city compared to Ottawa. It actually had its own bylaw and police officers, all the type of stuff. So it was known as a very bad place where you could pay cops and, you know, get hookers and all this type of stuff. So to be completely honest, I grew up off of LaFontaine where crack dealers and hookers were the norm. Like that was what you were growing up around, seeing every single day of your life, to the point like the hookers were like, here, have some change, you can go buy yourself candy at the store. And that was a part of living here in Vanier. So something that's unfortunate is the reputation has stuck, even though the city, it's amalgamated, it's grown up, it's, you know, it's changed so much and people still think it's like that, but it's not. It's a beautiful place.
Have you lived in other parts of the city?
Mostly the East End. I've always preferred East End. I found it more central to downtown and easier to get around. But yeah, I did a little stint on the other side of downtown toward Bronson, and I didn't like it. It was too far west.
What's your favorite beach in Ottawa?
Truthfully, it's not in Ottawa. It's in Gatineau Park at Meech Lake. There's two, and I like the furthest one called Blanchette.
What are your 3 favorite activities to do in Ottawa?
For sure, explore as a whole. I really think Ottawa is a walkable city, so I like to just pick a neighborhood, maybe bus there and spend the day walking around and just see what their little gems are, and talk to people. What's your favorite place to grab coffee, pastry, whatever? Just ask a random stranger because you'll find something you never knew existed in Ottawa. Another huge thing for me is exploring our cemeteries. I know that sounds crazy. Cemeteries have a ton of history. They're really, really fascinating. They tell us a lot about what was happening at different parts of the history within our city. You can learn about political heads you've never heard of, and interestingly, a lot of art, which is really, really cool. And is there a third one? That's 2, 3. My third one would probably be the library. I'm a reader, so I spend a lot of time in the library.
That's cool. Could you expand a little on the cemeteries? Is this a Facebook group or is this just you?
No, just it's just something I enjoy. I always have. My parents and my grandparents never shied away from going to the grave when we were a kid to, you know, put new flowers for a grandmother or an aunt or something, you know, whoever. So I guess when I was a kid, I thought of it as a garden more than I thought of it as a place where dead people rested. You know, I just thought, oh, there's grass here and flowers, and I like that. And as I aged, one of the things I noticed about cemeteries specifically is they're not abused by people. Like, people don't let their dogs run around and poop everywhere. They don't litter, things like that. So taking a walk in the cemetery, if you can't get away from the city, is sort of like an escape. It's quiet. There's beautiful trees. There's animals, all the things you could ask for in nature, except for a bunch of stones, of course, around you. But again, I mean, they are interesting. Like, you see some fascinating things. There's a mayor in the closest cemetery here who I'd never heard of until I found his bust. And he passed away drowning. And yeah, like, why would I know that? I have no idea. You know what I mean? But the whole story is actually written out on the bottom of his stone. But it's etched in from the weather now, so you can't get a really clear idea of it, but you can still see his name. I looked him up. I'm like, wow, this guy has such an interesting story, and he's a part of our city and changed things for us. And he started, the main roads for us, for example. So he's a huge part of our city.
That is cool. When I originally contacted you, you said you survived some abuse and drug addiction. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, absolutely. So, truthfully, growing up in Vanier, like I was saying, you're kind of surrounded by a lot of what you think is normal. And my parents, although we're not, crack dealers and hookers, were definitely drinkers and using drugs at times. So what I thought was normal was just displayed in front of my eyes at all times. So as I moved into becoming a high schooler, I thought people just did drugs, and that just seemed the norm, which led to like a series of bad events. So I wasn't very good at making choices for myself. I was very hyper responsible because my parents that were addicts were also ill, so I was often taking care of them, taking care of myself, and we're all dealing with this sort of addiction problem that sort of genetically came over to me. And then the abuse part came from partially my parents because they were not equipped to handle what was going on. It's interesting to be alive now because there's so many resources for people that have problems at their home, problems with drinking, problems with drugs. But when I was a kid, it wasn't as normal to have all that type of stuff around you. So the norm was, if your parents were alcoholics, you kind of just followed suit. That sort of seemed what it was, So I made bad choices. I ended up with some bad people. I had a boyfriend who was especially horrible to me, and it was tough. I was really young. I felt very alone. I didn't feel like I could turn to my parents for help for this. They made me feel like I laid my own bed. What's the term for this? You make your bed so you lay in it. That's really like the feeling I got from them about it. Which in turn I got my dad to ask me to come back and take care of him, but it wasn't like a loving situation come home. It was, okay, well, you've been in this bad situation and you need a break on paying rent, but I need someone to take care of me. So it was very traumatizing to have grown up with two people that were uncertain of themselves and equally uncertain of being equipped to handle what their own problems were. And I think that happens to a lot of people my age, is that we were given probably wonderful people for parents that had problems. Like I don't think of my parents as bad people. I think they were just ill-equipped, and I think that happens to people. So I'm 36, and I know a lot of people roughly my age that sort of carried on these things from their parents that didn't have all that equipment, but they're raising their kids quite differently because when they go to school, they're being provided, hey, you have a problem at home, we can give you this information, so if you're 36 and you're out there and you had a hard time, don't worry about it. I swear there's all kinds of resources out there. Ottawa is a great city. Ottawa is full of resources for people.
That pulls me right into my next question. When you were at this point in your life, how are the City of Ottawa and social services?
Yeah, at that point in my life, not great, not bad either. Like I think we've been very lucky, not even in Ottawa, but in Canada as a whole, to be rather progressive that way and sort of realize like mental health is very encompassing of a lot of things, including abuse and drug addiction and things like that. So when I was quite young, it was a little bit harder to just go to an office and say, hey, can I get some help? But these days you can get help from just about anything. Like Ottawa has a human needs task force that they provided actually solely for COVID, and it was to help people for mental health, drug addiction, things like that. There's a Wellness Together Canada program that just started recently, same thing. It's clear across Canada. I can give you this information later if you want to remind me, but you can text a number and you are immediately connected to a counselor that suits what's going on, whether it's domestic or drugs or whatever the case is. So when I was younger, no, I didn't get the resources I needed, but I'm more than happy to be alive right now and be aware of them and get to help people know about them.
You kind of answered this question with your introduction, but what was would you say, the defining moment that made you first get into drugs?
Mostly normalcy, to be completely honest with you. But also, what I thought was normal, I thought was cool, right? So I smoked my first cigarette when I was 9 years old, and I smoked my first joint at 11. And by the time I was 13, I was doing like acid and mushrooms and stuff like that. And by the time I was 15, I was doing cocaine and E and more. So the weird part about my personal life is that it's not because there was such a distinctive moment because I was so young, right? Like to be 9 years old and smoking a cigarette. Like I have a niece right now who's 7, and when I look at her, like she's a child to me, you know? And like I know kids that are 9 and I'm like, they're babies still, but they're not. They're human beings, right? But like they seem rather young, and I didn't have that progression. And in my lifetime, I've learned a lot about trauma, and it's actually quite normal for kids that were traumatized to not have a lot of memories about being connected to certain things because you're just so like just trying to get through whatever's going on, right? And so I think I viewed drugs and alcohol as both normal and escapism. So it was normal to escape in my head. So going towards people that would use drugs and alcohol just seemed like the right thing to do because that's what my elders and my examples were doing, right? So I mean, it's almost like a monkey see, monkey do when you grow up in it.
How did you find the strength to leave that world behind?
2 different things happened. So the abusive boyfriend that I ended up with, I wasn't on drugs when I was with him, but I was certainly a mess. You know, and like being at a mental mess is rock bottom. Doesn't really matter if you're on drugs or not. And this guy was highly abusive. He hit me, and when I got out of that, I was in a situation where I felt homeless, and so I was staying with somebody who I'm very close to, and he let me live with him, but it didn't feel like I had a place to stay per se. Like in my heart, I didn't feel like very much at home, and I was still taking care of my dad. So because my dad was sick, I had this sensation like my job was to take care of my dad, so I just did that, you know. And it was almost like if I didn't have my dad, I don't think I would have gotten through that, despite how stressful and crazy the situation was with my dad. My dad had quite a few heart attacks and was progressively getting worse and worse, primarily from alcoholism, so it's all connected, right? And yeah, like if I didn't have like this person who was kind of my dependent, I don't think I would have known what to do with myself or had any responsibility, so I would have found myself probably doing even more drugs, you know what I mean? So in a weird way, I was really lucky to have my dad, who was an alcoholic, to kind of keep me away from that stuff because I felt responsible for him. And then at 23, ironically, I was watching one of my friends get ready for a party, and it was New Year's Eve night. And they said, do you want to have a Happy Meal? And we're going to go get some McDonald's before we get ready to go out tonight. And I said, no, I'm never going to eat McDonald's again. That's going to be my New Year's resolution. And they made fun of me. And I said, no, if I quit drinking, I can quit McDonald's. No problem. You know what I mean? And hands down, I've never eaten McDonald's since. And I quit drinking that year too. And like over the years now, like I don't think of myself as a drinking problem, but like I can get drunk off like literally a sip of wine. It's way more than enough for me. So if I go to a party, I usually ask the waiter or the waitress to give me enough wine so that the water has color. So like a red wine, so like this much in water, so I can cheers, you know. And it just like people are like, are you drinking water? It ruins the cheers. But if you have a colorful drink, it brings people into like comfort. And the funny thing about alcohol is that it's so comfortable and so normal that when you choose no drinking and you go to a social event, people are like, you're so weird, why aren't you drinking, you know? And you're like, I'm fine, I'm actually having fun, look at me dancing and not falling over, you know. And it's socially unacceptable to be a non-drinker, so it makes people really oddly uncomfortable, you know. But it's fun for you. You don't go home hungover, you know.
Have you heard of the city's safe injection sites?
Yes.
What do you think about those?
Well, I don't know if you want to share this part, but I'll tell you a huge part of my life right now. Because I grew up in Vanier, homelessness, junkie, whatever, this is like a normal part of my day-to-day life. So the increase in usage in Vanier has gone up exponentially over the year of COVID. And I mean exponentially. Like it was noticeable before, but now it's really noticeable. So in the last 6 months, I've found 3 different people in the cemetery. My most recent one was last Friday. And all of them were injectors. So it's hard to say if it was heroin. I just learned actually recently that people buy fentanyl like by choice. I didn't realize that it was like also an option out there. So the guy that I found most recently was really young. It really hurt my heart. I had tears in my eyes when I was helping him. And I was trying not to let him know that, but yeah, so I called the safety injection site for this purpose. So when I found the guy, I didn't have my cell phone with me, which is pretty normal. I went for a walk to disconnect from electricity and electronics. But fortunately, because I'm sort of central city, the entirety of the cemetery has houses around it. So I just scaled the side until I seen somebody in their yard or in their laneway, and like clapping, like jumping up and down, like, please pay attention. And a woman seen me, and she came to the backyard, and her husband was right behind with the phone, ready to call 911. Clearly, like, I'm in the cemetery, obviously I need help, you know what I mean? So they called 911, and the woman gave me naloxone, which is like an adrenaline. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but you can get it at the safety injection site. And what it is like, I don't know the proper chemical terms, but you put it in and then it makes the brain have an instant withdrawal, but that instant withdrawal causes the brain to kick back into action, because what happens to fentanyl and opiate users is your brain goes to such a slow vibe that you might stop breathing, and that's generally how they pass away, because your brain stops telling your lungs to do its job. Okay, so it's quite sad actually. So after I got this naloxone, I didn't know how readily available it was. Like, I was unaware. It's not in your face, unfortunately. Not that it should be, but I think we should be aware of this as citizens. So I took the information and I called the safety injection site, and like, I need to know more. I want to know what this is. I want to know about it. What if I give it to somebody? Like, how alert will they be? Like, what kind of risk do I take by even giving this to somebody? Equally for myself, because helping people is great, but it can be dangerous, especially when the person's unpredictable, right? So so the safety injection site's really fascinating. You can get naloxone from them. You can go to any pharmacy. They'll give you 2 packages of naloxone right away off the top of, like, no questions asked. They'll just give it to you and you can keep it in your bag. You're not obliged to help people, but if you want to, you would literally just put them into recovery position. So the left side, take this naloxone, pump it up their nose, call 911, and just hope they don't get brain damage. I ended up talking to a police officer also, and I was just questioning, like, you know, I keep finding people and it's more now. So what do? Do I report this? Like, I have questions, you know, and the police officer, I was really kind about it. He's like, if you're noticing something, but you don't have proof of it, there's nothing wrong with making a report, because there's stuff that we can't know unless we know about it. Meaning, if I found 3 people in the cemetery and there's something suspicious that seems suspicious to me and I didn't report that, like, they might be going a long time without finding something that connects to that suspicion, right? So the police officer I talked to was really kind about it, and he explained a bunch of stuff to me as well. He's like, you know, we have the Good Samaritan Act, so he's like, the weird part about helping somebody with naloxone is that if you give it to them and they become suddenly alert, you took away their drugs, and they could be very angry with you. And he's like, so you have to make a choice. How will you protect yourself? And he's like, if they hit you, you have to hit them back. He's like, you can't just let yourself get beat up because you help somebody. So he's like, you know, what you should know is that you can't get charged for hurting somebody, but you can't hurt somebody. And I understood what he was saying, because I think what he was saying was, like, you shouldn't go around, like, looking for violence, but it's unpredictable what will happen if you give an opiate user the naloxone. But what will happen for sure is their brain will kick in. So it's hard to say if they'll be alert, but their body will work, right? So safety injection site, I mean, I think it's really important. I think the drug problem in Canada has changed a lot. I don't know if you've ever been to Victoria, BC, but it's really obvious there. It's very heartbreaking in Victoria. It's warmer there, so you see more people outside all the time, right? So it's not uncommon to walk up to a Tim Hortons and just see 2 people literally with the elastic, with everything in their arms still, and completely passed out. It's heart-wrenching. And I noticed since COVID started in Ottawa, the shelters are downtown, but because we're not, you know, populating downtown anymore because we're working from home, the homeless people have sort of spread out, right? So now they're more on this side of my neighborhood. And we've got a new shelter that just got built this year, and it's a little further up Montreal Road. It's not quite in Vanier, but it's the cusp, you know. So you're seeing a little bit more of the homeless people, and the homeless people aren't the problem. It's the drug usage that's really problematic, because these guys don't know what's going on. It's not unlikely for them to just walk in the road or fall over or something like that, which is the hard part, you know. So recently what I did with the safe injection site, I actually have a meeting with them next week. I'm going to pick up 20 naloxones because I'm friends with the homeless people in my neighborhood. I talk to them all the time. I'm going to give them some naloxones because they're the ones who are outside 24 hours a day, late at night, doing crazy things, seeing crazy things. And if maybe they can help somebody too, that would be really good. But it's not common for people to know this information, right? Like, it's not commercialized like the COVID numbers are, you know, so...
What do you think has led to the increase in the users around your neighborhood?
I think it's a couple of things. I believe there's such thing as like a collective consciousness or like a cultural consciousness where you live, and I think there's a lot of underlying stress that people don't even recognize. I think that the availability of things that are here for people are different than they were when I was young. Like the drugs that exist today are different from when I was younger and doing drugs. Like there's been times where I've been at social parties and I'm like asking the person, I'm like, but are you sure that's a cocaine? Because I used to do that and that's not what it looks like, you know? There's something very different about being alive now. Synthetic is the norm. The idea of synthetic is very normal. So I don't think they question a lot about what they're getting, which is a big problem. We know fentanyl is a huge problem. We know that it is circulating within our community. Before COVID started, we had 3,000 users. I learned this from a social worker. We had about 3,000 needle users in Ottawa, and the last time I talked to her, which was during COVID, actually, I ran into her at the grocery store. I'm like, am I noticing this? Like, is it me or is it because they've spread out more towards our neighborhood? And she's like, no, it's definitely gone up. She's like, people are more stressed out now, so the automatic progression goes up. So if they used to just dabble on the weekend, they might be dabbling on a Thursday now also, because we're at home, we're on lockdown, we don't know what to do with ourselves, we lost our job, we're stressed out, but I just got served, so I'm gonna do it, you know what I mean? And she was saying that's a common attitude, and I have to agree. I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning and says, hey, I'm going to be an addict today. I think what happens is life happens, the urge to escape happens, and those things dissolve into one stressful situation, and you all of a sudden find yourself an addict. You know, I don't think it's anything intentional by any means, but I wish I could say if I knew, I wish I understood more about it to say like what's the appeal. I don't grasp the appeal personally. But I mean, it is. I mean, some people love to drink, and even when I did drink, I didn't love it. So I mean, it's hard to say, right? So I don't know what the rise is caused by per se, but I do think the stress of life has certainly come up, and I think young people, like one of the things I noticed and why the reason I called the police was because the people I'm seeing these days are younger, which I find really heartbreaking. Not to say that it's not equally heartbreaking when somebody's older, but you know, like you kind of wonder, like, did that older person have a few tries already? Whereas this young person, you can kind of tell, like, this probably isn't a few tries. This is probably the first, and they're so close to dying from like a level of synthetic drug that you and I have no way to even discuss. Like, I couldn't tell you anything about fentanyl if I tried, you know, so.
Do you think the safe injection sites are helping the problem or making it worse?
A little bit of both. I don't love these methadone clinics. I have a lot of questions about how drugs help drugs. I think that if they are going to do drugs, yes, they should have some type of access to something that's clean, or at least the ability to get clean. And what I mean by that is like wash their hands and use, you know, like a clean needle of some sort. And the reason why is because if they want to get healthy or clean at some point, it would be a lot easier if they weren't, you know, riddled with disease that they shared with people and things like that. So yeah, I do think there's a value in having clean needles. I really do question what it means to take somebody off drugs with drugs. Like, I've always questioned that and found it very strange and thought, like, okay, because like for my choices, it wasn't easy to get off drugs, that's for sure, but I made those choices on my own, and maybe I was fortunate to not have that level of addiction chemically in my brain. Like, I think that also is a partial part of like what's going on for some people. There's something a little different within this, you know, scope of their little computer that lives up here that might be more addictive than the next person. But yeah, I don't know. It's really scary. It's really frightening.
What are your thoughts on Justin Trudeau legalizing pot?
Totally for it. Personally, I mean, I think plants are medicine in a lot of different ways. I don't think things should be abused. Truthfully, I do still smoke weed. And if I'm being really honest, I think more people have smoked weed for years of their lives than would ever even admit. So I think it was like a natural move. I don't want to see total drug legalization. Like, I don't want us to have like E and heroin and things like that legalized. I don't think that will help the war on drugs by any means. But I do think criminalizing pot is pretty preposterous considering like the earth literally gave it to us, you know.
What advice would you give to people struggling with addiction?
It's hard, right? Like if you are struggling with addiction, it's really hard to take advice. You may not want it, you may not want to hear it, you may not even be ready to hear it. I really believe that there are forces in the universe, so to speak, that are there for you. And I was lucky to always have someone show up at the worst time. So if you can recognize someone showed up for you, just try to remember someone cares about you. There are people out there that care about you. If you don't feel like you care about yourself, just try your best to realize you actually can move past things that you already have, and that now is not forever. Whatever's happening now does not have to be forever, and you can certainly change your life. But you just have to know that it takes time. So even though now is not forever, whatever you want is going to feel forever away for a little while until you get used to what's new and not being the person that you were and feeling sad and looking for drugs all the time. So I hope that's good advice for somebody.
I think that's great.
Oh, thank you.
We were going to transition out of that into your business now.
Sure.
And I think we're just going to do a stop and then restart.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are ready to go. So, when did you know you wanted to start your own business?
Oh my God, honestly, since I was 16. I hated having a boss. Before I became a wedding planner, I was actually a barber, which gives you the feeling like you kind of get a taste for a bit of self-employment, because you can rent a chair, or you have a boss that you can make a pay deal with of some sort, because barbering can have varieties of types of pay, so you kind of get that feeling, and you're managing your own clientele. But I was always I hated having other people's rules and schedules, I'm I don't want to be there at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. maybe 10:30, but I never really wanted to be well, what if I just don't feel like being there? Or what if something comes up that seems I should do this right now, because I feel like we should live our lives freer. But so I finally bit the bullet. I was tired of barbering. I took a huge risk. I spent a lot of years investing into my retirement and things like that. I always felt I knew I wanted to retire. My friends had made fun of me about it, and it's I don't care. I'm if there's one thing I've learned from all people in life, is that you have to prepare for your future to a point. You can't plan everything out, but you need to make good choices. So I bit the bullet one day, and I just told my boss, I'm listen, it's not you. I barbered for 8 years. I hate it. There's no boss that makes things better. And ultimately, I'm I'm going to go to school and become a wedding officiant and a ceremony person. He's okay, that's nuts, but if you ever want to come back, you can. I'm great, I never will. And that's exactly what I did. So I took a year off. I worked part-time at a coffee shop just to suffice, and I used a little bit of my savings, and I went to school, and I got myself all certified and organized so that I could do all this stuff. So now I am recognized by the government to marry the people, and I have a bunch of cool titles. One is called Life Cycle Celebrant, which is I learned about life cycles and ceremony and how to customize things without hitting the toes of cultural appropriation. So let's say you're wearing an Irish hat today. So let's say you were marrying a woman from India, and you definitely didn't want to have a Hindu wedding, but you wanted to incorporate different elements from your Irish heritage and her Indian heritage. I would put something like that together for you. So it's really, really fun. You never get the same wedding twice kind of thing, and it's much more interesting than the bland old and here we are today gathered for these moments, So it's really cool. So it was tough because things were going really good there the first 5 months, and then COVID hit. But alas, it's part of life, and I just keep telling myself my first year of business is probably going to be the hardest year of my life in terms of being a business owner and getting hit with multiple lockdowns and things like that. And my job is to gather people, and it goes against the rules, right? So it is what it is.
What are the ups and downs of, what do I call this room?
This is the wedding room.
What are the ups and downs of owning the wedding room and being an ordained metaphysical minister?
So ups and downs of the home wedding room is I also work out in this room. So I have to move my gym often, which can sometimes be just me being tired and not wanting to, and just You know, I'm like, oh, I have to clean the room. And also sometimes welcoming people, they don't know what to expect. Even though I tell them it's my home office, like they have some type of idea in their head that I live in a mansion or something like that. And I'm like, no, I just live in a house, you know. So you have to manage people's expectations, which is part of any life, any job anyway, right? But that's probably the hardest part, is just reminding people it's a house, and that, you know, they sign a contract with me. I only organize it to have the couple and their witnesses. So it's only 4 people plus myself, which is still under the COVID rule and all that type of thing. But sometimes they'll be like, well, the rules say 10 people. And I say, yeah, that's fine. 10 people, you know, in a social setting, in a gathering or whatever, but you have to have enough space to have everybody be spaced out, you know, whatever the COVID rule is. And you have to explain to them, like, this isn't a party house. You can't bring 10 people here, you know? And they're like, but they're Ontario. Everyone loves to say this, but by provincial law, they say. And I'm like, okay, I get what you're saying, you know? Like, I hear you, but this is my house. It's not a party house, you know? And then they're like, oh, so I've had to have 2 different couples, and I had to tell them, like, your guests can stand right at my window and watch through the window, but they're not allowed to come in the house. And they're like, you're really going to enforce this rule? I'm like, I have to. I own a business. I don't have a choice in that, you know?
Tell us some of your failures as an entrepreneur.
Okay, I'll tell you about my worst wedding ever. So I have for a variety of services. I have a custom service and I have a pre-written service. So the pre-written is to make it cheaper for people, so that if they don't have the money to budget out, they still can get an officiant with a full wedding. They don't have to think too hard, you know. So I was hired for this, and I always ask, like, do you want to do a rehearsal, because that counts for my time and I have to make sure that I organize it. And this couple didn't want that. They took the lowest price, everything, and they were good. And then the pandemic hit. So over the course of a few months, I had put out a few big emails to, like, all of my clients saying, like, if you're getting married within these, like, blocks of time, we're going to need to consider a backup plan, or if you want to postpone, let me know now, you know, so we can plan all this stuff. All my clients were great, except for this one client. She wrote to me and she was like, you shouldn't be sending these emails. You're scaring people for no reason, all this type of stuff. And I thought, wow, it's so weird, because like the best thing to do is make a backup plan, you know, no matter what. Even if there is no pandemic, if you have a rainy day, you should have a backup plan. Like, it's so simple. This is my cat, her name's Katie. So she was good until about a week before her wedding. The rules had changed twice, gone down in gatherings, gone down in what we were allowed to do. All types of things were like, we were coming down to the next lockdown. Like, it was very obvious. So, multiple of her vendors suggested to her to postpone, and she called me. And I said, what's wrong? Like, you sound upset. And I said, what do you want to do? Like, tell me what you want to do, you know? And she says, well, I don't know anything. And then she was really frustrated. And I said, okay. She was getting really mean. And I said, okay, well, it sounds to me like you want to do a rehearsal, so I'll do one. And, you know what, just to save the stress, I said I'd do it for free. So I drove an hour to her place, or to the venue, to do this. She was late for it. They thought it was really funny to be late, which I found frustrating because I was offering it for free. And then the next day, she was 33 minutes late for her wedding. And I was frustrated, but it was a multitude of things. Like, it was the attitude and the rudeness, and it was like a culmination of things, right? So when I asked the husband, like, hey, where's our wife, since we're getting married in, 10 minutes, he said, oh, she's still at home. And I said, but it's like more than a 30-minute drive. So I told him, like, there's another wedding I have to go to today, and I schedule it, I schedule my stuff so that I have enough time, but it wasn't well received, and they took it as a threat and said, you're threatening to leave my wedding? And I said, no, but I mean, if you're gonna not get here until after the wedding starts, I have to consider my time. You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason why you chose your time. So they bombarded my reviews. They got their family to write negative reviews, all this type of stuff. I was able to contest a lot of the reviews, mostly because they weren't part of the actual situation, and where they put the reviews, the company says, like, if the bride and groom want to write something, they can, but no one else can. So I was able to remove a bunch of these, negative reviews or whatever. But yeah, this girl was really nasty to me. She kept it going for months. I had 4 months. I had to send a cease and desist letter to her because they were literally bullying me and harassing me. They had multiple friends go onto my website and try to put bad reviews on it. It was crazy. So I told her, I'm like, if this happens again, I've already spoken to a lawyer. Like, And that was the end of that. But like, it was nuts. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, you're so mad at me because you disrespected the contract that you signed and you didn't want to be there. And it taught me a lot. Like, it taught me that, one, I don't want to do those types of weddings where, you know, like, there's two types of people. Like I was saying earlier, like, I want to offer people the opportunity to get married under budget because they have a situation going on. But there are some people who are looking for under budget purely because they're cheap, and I recognize that in them, but I was like, oh, people are people, and I tried to just be like, it's okay, you know what I mean? But then I had to learn the hard way is like, if you're going to value your service out, you have to attract the right clientele, right? And like, I think being a minister and a spiritual person, I struggle with that a lot, where I don't want to take more money from people or I don't want to charge more. But I also realize that sometimes when you charge that extra $50 or $100, it takes away a certain type of client. You know what I mean? So some people are willing to pay the extra $50 for the value, but the other person might not value anything you do. Like they were like, well, we think this is too expensive anyway, even at the beginning. So I could have learned my lesson probably earlier. But you know what? I mean, it's all part of life. Not every wedding is going to be perfect. Everyone's going to have different expectations. And the one thing I really found that I learned from them was now I have a better way to integrate with a client the first time I meet them. Like I went through all my notes and like, what did I ask them? You know, what did I say? Like, what about this? Like, where did it all go wrong? You know, so now I have a better way to say like, okay, this client is not my person, and that I want to marry people that I can almost be friends with, you know?
That was definitely one of your worst days as a wedding officiant.
Yeah.
Can you tell me one of the best?
Yes. I've married a couple named Donna and Laval. They're so cute, so in love. Both of us, their second marriage, and they're like not a typical couple. Like they met as friends, you know. They didn't just start dating. They were friends for 20 years before they ever considered dating. So they had this base of like good friendship. So interacting with them was so much fun. And I got to know their love story a little bit, so I did a custom wedding for them. And when I do that, I give each person a questionnaire, and then I take both questionnaires, and then I draw their love story out of that, and I make a ceremony for them. So I learned a little bit about their love and the history they've shared as both friends and people, and now lovers, and soon to be married. And I found out that when they decided they were in love, they didn't get engaged. They were both like, that's it, we're getting married. We love each other, you know? So the day before their wedding, I called Laval and I said, hey, like, I know you guys didn't have a proper engagement, so I know this is kind of silly, but I have these dollar store glow-in-the-dark rings. I'm like, do you want to sneak? Like, I'll meet you 5 minutes before and I'll put it in a little ring box, and then you can, you know, like pop the question to your soon-to-be wife. He's like, this is genius. I'm like, yeah, I'm so happy you want to do this, right? So that's exactly what we did. I actually was lucky enough to videotape it as well. And then after their wedding, they sent me a little card, and just all sort of cute people. And they said, we're so stoked about the ring that they put it in a little glass ornament and they keep it on their Christmas tree now. So she's like, every single year we're going to look back at our engagement and remember this. I'm like, oh, like I made part of their love story.
Yeah, that's nice. Any funny stories that you can tell us about the wedding business?
Yeah, this is my favorite story. Oh my god, this is the best. Real life is real life. I don't think people should shy away from what it is to be real. So I was with this couple. They wanted to get married in their house, and they had a son who was paraplegic. Go. So the son that was paraplegic, so this whole family is sports people. They watch hockey, they watch football, the dad plays softball. Everybody is like sport, except for the one son, but he watches sports with them, right? So they have some family there, and I do the wedding with them, and I said, okay, you guys are officially married, congratulations, you can kiss your bride, everybody clap. So everyone's clapping and all this, but what happens when you watch sports, you get heated and you swear a lot, right? So everyone in the room is like, yeah, woo! The young paraplegic boy who's about 14, he's like, yeah, fuck you! And it's hysterical. The mom's like, oh my god. I'm like, that's okay, you guys watch sports a lot. She's like, yeah, he totally thinks that he's like against a team right now. But very real life, you know, that's part of who they are. That's what their days are like, and they play sports and they cuss at the TV, but like they love each other, you know. So I thought it was great. I didn't think they should be embarrassed. I'm like, this is your life. This is exactly the perfect moment for you, and it's like their story. They're gonna get old and be like, remember that moment on our wedding when our son did this? And they will always cherish that moment, you know. So swear words are not bad moments.
Can you walk us through a normal day if someone approaches you to get married here?
Sure, like here in the wedding room? Yeah, absolutely. Usually most people approach me through email or phone call. The wedding room package is pretty simple. It's a 1 hour package, and I ask people to arrive 15 minutes early, so if they have a tripod or something they want to set up, they can. Then I do a ceremony with the couple here right in front of my background so that they get nice photos. And then once we're done the ceremony, we sign the papers, of course, and then I go to my kitchen and I bring them a cake and a bottle of non-alcoholic bubbly, and I get them little glasses. And I have a proper, beautiful bride knife and all this, so they can get the cute pictures, and then they have their family with them, and then they can just enjoy each other for the rest of the hour and have, their classic photos. And then when they're done, I usually greet them, and I stay in the room for 1 minute, and I take a picture of them and their witnesses, so they have one group photo together, and then I get to see them off onto the rest of their life. It's a really fun, simple hour. For me, it brings a lot of joy. The best part is sitting in the kitchen and waiting it out and just hearing the laughter. That is my favorite part. I love when it's over and they're just doing their thing, and I'm in the kitchen doing my own thing, and I can just hear laughter through my house. It's the best part of the wedding room for sure.
Do you want to know where people can find you out on the internet?
Yes, you can find me at samanthareno.ca or on Instagram at ceremonies_by_Samantha.
So I got a little blurb from you, and I heard you've done some acting.
I have.
Can you tell me about that?
Absolutely. All Ottawa made, and happy to be a part of it. It's really fun. There's some really great people in Ottawa. There's a great acting scene, and I've been really, really privy to be with a lot of the great people here. Some of them are Randy Smith, Vincent Valentino, Kim Valentine, and her husband Joel, and other people that I've seen in movies. Just great people here. So one of them I acted in was called Monster Pool 2. There's a series of them. I think we're on the 4th one now. That's on YouTube. You can watch the full length, and it's an all Ottawa made movie, and it's an anthology. I believe there's 10 stories in that one. And then I'm also in another movie called Unholy Night. It's a Christmas horror, and it's a ton of fun. It's on Amazon Prime, so we're worldwide, baby. And it's also another one that was completely Ottawa filmed, and everybody in it is from Ottawa. It's produced in Ottawa, everything. It's so cool. It's so exciting. So Ottawa's on the map from Amazon Prime. If anyone wants to watch it, Unholy Night.
Very cool. If you could have a leading role in a blockbuster movie, they got an unlimited budget, and they want to know who you want for the co-star. Who do you choose?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. Okay, my guts are saying Johnny Depp, but part of me is saying Joe Rogan, but it's just because I really want to meet him, and he feels like he can act because he's a comic,
What would be a secret, or maybe something not too many people know about the showbiz or the acting industry?
It's comparable to Instagram in the sense that this frame that you're looking at, you can't see the 360 of the room that's actually being acted in. So it's not as glamorous as you might think it is. In your head, you're like, oh, a movie, there's gonna be this and lights over here, but it's actually a man holding the light. Even actors and actresses, because we're low budget, you're helping each other. You don't have a choice in that, right? So it's definitely not as glamorous as you think, but it's certainly fascinating to see the whole thing come together. And I think the other weird part of doing a movie is realizing how much repetitiveness happens. I didn't realize how many times a scene has to be taken. And then it made me realize, wow, I really understand why they get paid so much now, because if you're talking to two people on a screen, for example, they'll film from behind this person's head to get this person's face, then behind this person's head to get this person's face, then here to see both of their faces. You know what I mean? So you have to repeat the lines every single time. It's not just done in one seamless, beautiful shot. So what you think is going to be an hour is going to be 5 for sure. So you have to bring a lunch if you want to be an actress.
In your movie Unholy Night, what was your role in that movie?
I played Drunk Dead Debbie. She's quite the character, and ironically, this character made me laugh a lot because She died by throwing up. That's how she became Drunk Dead Debbie. And while I was talking to the producer about this, he's like, do you think you can do this? I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, man, when I drink, I got hungover all the time. It's like going to be really easy for me to act on this one. It's not a glamorous movie. It's not pretty or cute, but it was a ton of fun. And Drunk Dead Debbie I think she'll be a cult classic one day, personally. And if I get to go to Comic-Con and be one of those like obsolete actresses, I'm so for it.
What advice would you give to young people trying to get into the industry?
Into acting?
Yeah, into acting.
Shamelessly go to the opportunities. Do not expect people are coming to you. If you see an ad that says you won't get paid, but you should come and act on this movie, that's what you have to go toward. Certainly don't expect to make money right away. And the one thing that I never knew that I would never have known is that actors are unionized. And in order to actually get paid well and to get paid gigs, you do have to be unionized. So there's a progression. So if you go towards those free gigs, you start building a resume, which actually puts you ahead of a lot of people who just go directly to an agent. Yeah, interesting, right? I would never have known. I think acting is just generally fun and should be done for fun. You know, like, don't take it too seriously. I've only acted in scary movies. I like a scary movie, so every opportunity has been scary movies, and filming a scary movie is not remotely scary whatsoever. In fact, it's pretty goofy and silly, and like you're laughing most of the time. And the other thing is to just realize you're with people, you know what I mean? So try not to think of them as the character and to remember that they are the person that they came here as, you know? So if their character is Drunk Dead Debbie, Samantha is probably not like Drunk Dead Debbie, you
know? You told me you used to be a bodybuilder.
I did. I even went on stage and everything.
No way.
Yeah, I was a bikini bodybuilder. I did that about 10 years ago. You know what? It was 10 years ago now. It's weird to think that it was 10 years ago. But yeah, I did it. I didn't love it. I hated it. I actually love eating so much that the restriction was difficult for me. Like, to not be able to just go to your friend's birthday party and have whatever, like, amazing dish they're making, or, you know, because you're like, oh, I have to eat salad. I didn't like that. And I wasn't strong, and I hated that. So, like, I mean, personally, I don't recommend bodybuilding to people in the sense of going on stage and like all that restrictive dieting. I actually think it's quite hard on the body. But I do definitely recommend exercising to people. I think it's important, like whether it's lifting weights or running or swimming, whatever works for you, exercise is key. But I don't think the goal should be to have a six-pack. I think it should be solely to be strong and functional. How have you been getting your exercise during the lockdown? Well, the wedding room dubs as what I call the wedding gym. So I have some weights and stuff, and I bring them in this room just because I have enough space in here compared to the rest of the other rooms in my home. I've been walking a lot. I've always been a pedestrian, but more so like actively every day. Like I really need to go for a walk right now, even though I've done this workout today because I need to get outside. That's the hard part of lockdown is like, I don't know, I get stuck in my work and then I'm like, oh, right, I should go do stuff outside, but then the sun's gone and then like, oh, I don't want to go outside now because it's not nice anymore, you know? So I've been really pushing myself on that. And also, one of the things I've liked about the lockdown walks is seeing more of my neighbors and seeing some of my neighborhood friends, you know? So I've introduced a few of my friends to the cemetery, actually, even, where they're like, we don't know where else to walk. We're tired of walking, you know, the same circle. So go to the cemetery. You'd be surprised what you're going to see. You'll see some birds, you'll see cardinals and like starlings, and they're really cute, you know, and you can look at some of the history of our city. And the best thing I keep hearing from my friends in the neighborhood is, wow, Samantha, you're right. It's really quiet and it's like not littered and everything is so much nicer than the rest of the city. I'm like, right, just go and enjoy it as a park. It's super beautiful. You don't have to sit down and have lunch. Like you could. I'm sure no one would argue with you, but I mean, it's really just a beautiful place. So it's been the best way to get exercise with friends for sure. Where before I used to go to the gym and like I had friends at the gym, but now I feel like, you know, I'm more likely to call a friend and be like, do you want to go for a hike with me or do something like that? So I'm like exercising with my friends more, which is nice. Are you getting to know the neighbors in the neighborhood more in the lockdown? Yes and no. Funny because like I find there's less elderly people outside. You know, they have more of like the fear about it, which I find kind of a bummer. I really like a lot of the old people in my neighborhood. And like there's one lady, like she always turns her face away from people now, even when she has her mask, because that fear really sits with her, you know, which I do find a bit of a bummer. But one of the things I have noticed is people in my neighborhood that I've always seen as drivers, that I'm like, oh my God, that person walks. And I'm like, in my heart, I'm like, yay. Because it's good for them, it's good for our environment, and it's also good for people to discover their neighborhood. I mean, if there's going to be things like, you know, a rise in drug usage and stuff like that, like the more of us that are involved in our own community, the better we are and the safer as a community we are, even if drug usage doesn't go away, you know. So I want people to be outside. I think it's cool. That's actually, it's one of the best parts of the lockdowns is our community becoming more clear about the community they live in.
Do you want to touch a little bit on back in the day when you were a barber hairstylist?
Sure.
What was the...
So I was a barber specifically. So I didn't do any women's hair. I did only men. Okay, so I did shave and like shave the face with a straight razor or fades and things like that. Just lining up beards, all that kind of thing. To do hair like mine, like long like this, I'm pretty lost on it. I'm like, oh my God, there's so much hair. But it was an interesting world to be in. It's not to say that there are not lady barbers out there, but there are in fact less lady barbers than there are male barbers, right? So I dealt with a ton of sexism, lots and lots of that. Racism as well, combined with sexism. A lot, like island men, for example, don't want a white woman doing their hair, and they will tell you, you're a white girl, white girls don't do black people hair. And they're really mean to you about it. You're like, okay, sorry, you know, but even though you know you can do it, you can't convince people, so you just kind of let them do what they need to. I met quite a few men who would just be like, well, you can't even grow a beard. I'm like, yeah, I know, but I'm looking at you direct so I can get that nice, like, clean look at you, you know? And they'd be like, I want the male barber. And I'd be like, he can only grow one whisker. I can give you a really good beard, though, you know? But that wasn't always, like, it was not always, like, the case. But it was actually really fascinating. One of the best parts of barbering was kind of like having free university, because you talk to so many people every single day. And everyone needs a haircut, the poorest of the poor and the richest of the rich, you know? So... I had a huge kid clientele. I love kids. I find they're funny and smart and interesting, and I want to hear their ideas, and I would converse with the children. So I would actually find myself being like, hey mom, hey dad, like, can you go get a coffee or a newspaper? Like, I'm trying to have a serious discussion about whatever this 6-year-old needs to tell me, whether it's sharks or Pokemons or, you know, soccer or whatever. Like, I wanted them to know that when they came to the barbershop, they were equal to all of our customers. So you're in my chair, you're my client, I'm not going to talk to your mom, I'm talking to you, you know? So that was really fun. And I loved the elderly people because they were like the reflection of the day for me. Like, I would be like, so, you know, what are you looking at today? You're 96 and I'm cutting your hair. Like, what are we doing? Are we just having a regular haircut? Are we getting dressed up for something? And then, you know, they'd be like, oh, I'm having my 78th wedding anniversary. And you're like, what? That's crazy, you know? And then you get to learn about these really cool, you know, ideas of life and see people in every shape or form. Like, you see people at their worst sometimes, you see people at their best sometimes, you know, and it's, the thing I miss about barbering is the people. I don't miss cutting, I don't miss any of the physical action of cutting, but I miss the interaction of just having someone in my chair for 30 minutes and do something like you're doing. Just a little interview, talk, learn about life, you know, get some advice, get a book recommendation, restaurant recommendation, who knows, you know, but it was a ton of fun, and I don't think there's any job in my life that I'll learn quite as much from that had nothing to do with my job. It's great.
Yeah, it sounds like you enjoyed it. That concludes all my pre-prepared questions. One question I did get when I got here is, do you want to show off your tattoos?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people always ask about my tattoos, so I have a few. So these are moons, and it's the waxing and the waning moon, so the phases of the moon, so to speak. And they're different colors because we have different chapters of life, and our lives are always transitioning, so that's why they're not identical, right? But there's a beginning and an end, so to speak. I have a key to life here. I think there are many keys to life, but I try to tell myself I have at least one. I can get through this all the time. This particular tattoo is a circle, and it's red. So red is the color of our blood and passion and things like that, so think life. It's a circle because we have to go up to go down, and sometimes we're in the bottom, we gotta just work really, really hard to get up, and sometimes things just go downhill, but it's part of life. And it's hollow because we have to get through things. So it's a reminder that I can do these things and I can get through it. And you know, if I'm having a day where I'm just like, bah, it actually does work, where I'll like do something or even notice it in the mirror and I'm like, right, I can get through this. You gave this tattoo for yourself for a reason. And this guy is my only barbering tattoo. It's really popular for barbers to have, you know, like really cool tattoos, but I didn't want tattoos all the way up my arms. So I got this little straight blade. So I used to do this to my kids all the time. I'd be like, here, I'll give you a little shave, you know, and they'd be like, ah! They used to like think it was really funny. And I have this guy, which is a symbol for love, from a metaphysicist who wrote a book in the late 1800s. And his definition for love is that it's the giving and the re-givings of life, which I thought was really beautiful, because it's not just about give and take. He says it's giving and re-giving, which is, it's just nicer than the typical, like, I take your love, you know, because you do give back love in order to get love, so. And then I have today, because we only have today. And I try to remind myself of that all the time too, because even though I like to plan to the future, you can't rely on all your plans, you know. I mean, if anyone had learned anything about that, it was definitely this year. You can't always rely on your plans, you know.
Favorite source of news?
Well, okay, so I do look at the headlines in the sense that I need to know the fastest source of if there's something happening that's going to affect my job. And that's only really been this year. I actually swore off mainstream news the day that Trump became the president because I knew that it was just going to be a lot of like hogwash and argument and opinion, and I just didn't really want to know about it. I like Vice, to be totally honest with you. I don't necessarily think they're a news source, but I like the way they dig into things and look at things, and they're willing to say, hey, this is not a very popular idea, but we're going to look at it anyway. And they have some deep stuff. Like, they get into some pretty deep situations with themselves. I think they've even gotten in trouble and like banned from countries from some of the work they've done. So I always find that interesting. When it comes down to like what is happening in the world today, I find it really hard to discern. Like, sometimes I'm like, I don't know, is this a conspiracy theory? Because last year it wasn't, and this year it's been proven, you know what I mean? And it's really hard to make a decision on that. So I just try to take all news objectively and try to say, okay, is this an opinion piece or is it fact? And how much of the factual article is fact and just opinion? So most of the time, if I'm reading in mainstream news, which is most likely CTV because it's the first one that usually pops up, I try to just look at the exact information, like what possessed me to read this. So if it's about COVID, for example, and it says like lockdown's coming, like the only information I'm looking for is what criteria exists that would put us into a lockdown. So that might not even come from the news. It's probably going to come from like Ontario.ca, you know. So, but otherwise, I'll be honest, I don't find the news affects my life that much, so I just try to like only look at it when I think something's coming up, or somebody in my life talks about it. That's actually, you know what, my main source is probably listening to people, if I'm going to be honest with you. They'll say something like, oh, you know, Ford's talking about this, or this guy, Justin's talking about this. No, listen, I'm like, does this affect me? Do I have to worry about this right now? And they're like, no. But if it does, like if I really want to go somewhere, like, or we're banned from a country or whatever, then I'm like, I need to know about this, so I'll look it up quickly, you know. But yeah, primarily people listening, because everyone watches the news, so you don't have to watch the news that much to find out what's going on.
I don't know if you would have one, but who is your favorite news anchor?
Probably Leslie Robertson.
Okay, how has the lockdown affected you positively?
Well, it gave me time to create the wedding room, and I want to work more on the metaphysical side. I think I actually forgot to answer that part of your question. So metaphysical minister, or what metaphysics means, what is beyond physical. So it could be thoughts or love or spirituality, whatever that might mean to you. So because I am a minister, I would like to focus a little bit on that. So it's given me time to study more about how do I use Instagram to make a following, for example, and how do I go about helping people in a better and more organized way if somebody approaches me and wants to talk about spirituality or something like that. I studied over the first lockdown cognitive behavioral therapy and neurolinguistic programming, which was fascinating, and I wouldn't have had time to do that otherwise. My house is way cleaner than normal. And truthfully, actually, I've been cooking at home a lot more. I've always been a good cook, but I think like there's something enjoyable about kind of like not going out and not having the option to. Like you're kind of become a creative cook again, and I really enjoyed that part of, you know, I'm like talking to one of my girlfriends, I'm like, what are you making for supper? And then she's like, I'm gonna make this. And I'm like, oh, that sounds amazing. But then I'll be like, I'm gonna amalgamate that with this and then make some type of fusion dish, you know, and it's been like a really good foodie adventure.
Yummy. Have you developed any new hobbies during the lockdown?
I'm closer to my cat. Actually, yeah, one of the things that I did was I forced myself to have an organization schedule of chores. Because I hate having one cleaning day, you know, like I don't want my house to get so messy that I have a whole day cleaning. What a pain, that's not fun for me. So I put a chalkboard up in my kitchen and I cut it in half. So I have a chore per day. So it's one half has 7 slots with each day of the week. And each day of the week I have one big chore that makes my household run, whether it's laundry or grocery shopping or taking out the garbage. You know, those like big things that absolutely have to be done all the time. And then on the other half of the chalkboard, I have it split up into AM and PM. And it was because what I was finding really difficult in lockdown was I suddenly didn't have a morning routine anymore. And I was kind of like, what am I doing? And I waste time, or I'd read for like hours, and then all of a sudden it'd be like noon, and I'm like, where is my time going? You know, so this AM PM thing is super simple stuff, and one of my friends made fun of me about it, but honestly, you have to actively develop your morning routine for it to benefit you. Otherwise, the morning routine makes itself for you, and it might not be benefiting you, right? So my morning routine was like reminding myself, like, I'm like, what do I like doing in the morning? And it was like, I want to read for 30 minutes with coffee. I want to make sure I stretch in the morning. I want to study in the morning. So like during my first lockdown, while I was doing these classes online, I wanted to make sure I dedicated an hour per morning to this, and not find myself at 1:30 in the afternoon and be like, well, I'll just study tomorrow, you know, because it's too easy to do that during lockdown. I think a lot of people get like confused about their time, and then they're like, it's just like a day off, you know, and then like suddenly many days have passed and you're like, wow, my house is so messy. So this new, I don't know if it's a hobby, I don't know if I would describe it as a hobby, but like redeveloping like how I handled my day-to-day household life was sort of my hobby for a little while, because I had to recreate it, actively look at it, make sense out of it. Why should I put this chore here and that chore there? Like I do groceries on Thursday because it's the day that the sales change, but I wasn't thinking about that before, you know what I mean? And then I realized like, oh, it makes so much sense to go on Thursday because like now I have this, and like you have to put the garbage out on Sunday because Monday is the garbage day, you know? So I just accorded that to directly like, okay, I know I have to do these things on this day, and then I just like punched in everything else. And now I have this little checkboard and I check off my little checks, you know, if I did my chore, I put a little check mark like a kid, but it's so good because it makes you stay on track, and it makes you have like a dopamine hit. You know, when you get a like on Instagram, you're like, oh yeah, it's the same thing. Like, yeah, it's fantastic. So it was actually like a really productive time for me, for sure. Like I was able to use the time to try to improve everything I could in my house and in my business life as much as I could.
That's good. Has the lockdown brought families closer together?
Hard to say. I think hard to say. I mean, I think everything kind of like lives on a spectrum of duality. So I think for sure for some families, I bet you yes. I think for some families maybe no. I seen an article this morning saying how you know, we focus on all the mental health of people being lonely, but there's no focus on the mental health of people who can't get away from each other, which I thought was really like, what an interesting spin on that, which is very true, because we do need to be alone, you know? It's like too much alone time can be bad for us, but if we're with people too much, we can't shut down and just kind of focus a little bit. So I think I would bet my guess is teenager families, like where there's teenagers, things are probably tenser because teenagers are bored and frustrated and they're growing and they're like, and they're testing boundaries and stuff, and moms and dads are probably at home and like, wow, I just want you to go out and you can't. But I think for the people who have younger kids, they probably really lucked out and got to really, see their kids grow up instead of watching them come home from school and learning about their growing up instead. So yeah, I think for the people who have young kids, they probably really got the best out of it.
If you could have a billboard right at the corner of Montreal and Saint Laurent, what would be on it and why?
Probably, okay, I have two answers for this. One of them would be, don't run across the street. And that's actually a life rule I have. I firmly believe we should not run across the street because if you're running across the street, you're running for your life. End of story. That's the only reason you're running across the street is so that you don't get hit by a car. So I witness this a lot, so I would want that there. But equally, I would probably want something that said something motivational, and I think it would be challenge is the root of growth. Because I think people forget that a lot. Like, they don't like to be opposed. They don't want to be challenged, but ultimately you can't grow unless you're opposed or challenged.
If you could go back in time and talk to your 18-year-old self, what would you say and why?
I would tell her that she is gonna get through it. And that no matter how hard it seems and no matter how shitty it is, the future actually is better. And I would say that to any teenager, to be completely honest. Whether it was myself or a teenager I'm at right now, I think teenagers are not able to see too far into the future. They haven't acquired that ability yet to say, hey, I can plan for something that far in the future and still know it's going to happen. Or be able to see that things get better. And I would say that to both myself and any teenager. The future will be better because you will have all the control and you will be able to make the decisions.
If you could have dinner with any three people, dead or alive, who would you choose?
Elon Musk for sure. 100% Elon Musk. Kanye West, actually. I find Kanye West fascinating. It's not about his music, it's about his ideas. I find he has huge ideas. I often think people under evaluate Kanye West as like a crazy person. He's not. I think they just misunderstand what his bigger ideas really are, and maybe he's not great at expressing them. And probably Graham Hancock. No, 100% Graham Hancock. Do you know who he is?
Yes.
Graham Hancock, he studies ancient histories. Yeah, and he has ideas that there might be more to our history books. Fascinating, man. Yeah, every time I've watched a documentary by him, I'm like, wow, I've read a few of his books too, Fingerprints by the Gods. I read another one. He was my first 700-page book that I actively chose by myself. That wasn't from school. And he's really fascinating. He's been all over the world. He's scuba dived all over the world. He learned to scuba dive in his late 50s. Like, just really interesting person, He's been on Joe Rogan quite a few times. If you have an interest in him, you've seen him on that like quite a few times for sure. And he's got a banned TED Talk. He's got all kinds of he's a controversial person, but he has a huge mind. And he's looking at the entirety of humanity, which is why I find him really fascinating. I like people who have big human ideas, like what's going on in our society as a whole and us as human beings, not just the one person, but like everything, So I think all three of those people think like very large like that, what's going on in the entirety of humanity. So those are the brains I want to pick for sure. But Elon Musk, it's also partially because I think he might be a robot and I just need to look at his face,
I heard it again. What is the biggest hurdle in your life right now?
Truthfully, I want to move on with like career stuff, but it's frustrating right now because most of my work involves gathering people, and people feel very uncertain about gathering, and that's the frustrating part. So I don't fear the virus, and I believe there is a virus out there, and I get why people feel the fear. I understand it completely, and I respect it. But I do find it frustrating because, if you want to have a wedding, for example, every time, the news is like, there's going to be another lockdown, people immediately don't want to book anything. They're afraid to. And then if I do other work, like if I want to coach people or if I want to do something more spiritual and have a group of girls over, for example, to do like a healing circle or whatever, you can't really do that anymore. and it doesn't feel as comfortable through the screen. Like you're missing the element of the energy with the people, and just sort of like getting that vibe from the person. Like the screen, I find, really takes away from that, so I miss the one-on-one, I miss just being able to do something even as simple as this, just have a conversation with somebody without the fear part, or people being like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, like it's okay, I still want to see you smile.
If you won the lottery, how would you spend it?
I would definitely I would sell this house. I would actually clean this house up completely and sell it. And then I would buy a house on a lake somewhere within about a 90-minute drive of Ottawa. Ottawa's my hometown and I still love Ottawa. I don't really want to be that far away from it, but I definitely want to live on a lake. And then I'd probably sequester some money for anything else I think of that I would need for my retirement. And then any leftover money, I would probably look into causes that I wanted to take care of. And what I mean by that is learn how the money is distributed and how my money can change that. So a great example would be, I'm pretty sure it's breast cancer. I think it's 97% of the funds they get goes towards marketing and paying their employees and this stuff, this paraphernalia and merchandise, and 3% goes towards funding for the actual research. So how could I use my own money to make it that these employees or whatever get paid, but the scientists who are actually doing the work get the money that they need and that they can help us as humans,
Tell us something interesting about yourself most people don't know.
If they would let me, I would jump out of a plane in a heartbeat with no tandem jumper. No shame, I have no fear. I don't know if that's not unknown about me, but my lack of fear is way higher than I think most people can possibly estimate. And I've been skydiving already, and honestly, I begged the guy, I'm just let me jump. And he's legally I can't, but he's you really are the person who could.
Do you know how your parents met?
Yeah, my parents went to school together. Actually, my parents are both from the neighborhood, Vanier. So when my parents were kids, it was called Eastview. And my dad went to Eastview High School, and my mom lived in the neighborhood. They didn't go to the same school. My mom went to an English school. My dad went to the French school. And they just crossed paths regularly. And then they did not get together, though, until they were closer to their late 30s. And then they decided they wanted to both have children. And that's literally how my family came about, was because it was time to have babies now. So I know they dated in high school, but I think it was your high school love is not necessarily the love of your life. It's only the love of your life at that time. So I think they were just trying to recreate something that maybe existed for them at one point in their life. But it didn't work out that way, but they still got their kids.
Did you enjoy school?
No, I didn't like school. Which is funny though. I love learning, but you know what? The school is funny, right? Because school, you're really forced to do a lot of stuff. And I think it was the school system that didn't do very well, so much as it wasn't that I didn't like learning. You know what I mean? It was just that school was really boring, and the way they presented the information was really boring. And I would just be like, this is so boring. I'm so bored, But I could do the work, and I loved reading and that type of stuff. I just didn't want to do it in class because we had to do it this certain way, and I'd be like, but my brain is still reading, and you're asking me to do math now, And I'd be like, but I want to go back to the book. And they'd be like, no, you can only read for 10 minutes. You're like, what? That's crazy. You need to read for 4 hours. So, okay, so spirituality. So I do have my own view, of course, and that view is pretty broad, and it's a little bit crazy. And if you're Catholic and you're watching this, try not to condemn me, but I really believe that self is God, and that the universe is expressing itself through every individual variable that could possibly play out, here in the spectrum that is Earth. So I've heard this from some people. They're like, you have a God complex, but in a weird way, yes, I do, but I think everybody is God. So it's not like I think I'm God and I preside over all the things. I think that everything that is alive and that is existence is part of what it is, whatever that source or powers that be is. But something I've always noticed in ancient texts and different religious texts, I've always had a strong interest in stuff like that. It seems to me that it's really common across the board globally that to know God is to know yourself. If you just know yourself and look within yourself, you will find the answers of God and all these types of things, right? So whether you look at God as a man in the sky or, a light source or whatever the case is, it seems very clear to me that ancient texts, thousands of years of brains of consciousness have been saying, like, this is the way. We are sure if you just know yourself and you get to know yourself, you're going to find that connection that you're looking for to, the bigger source of life. So it's something that I push. I have a little ministry called the Self-Center Canada, and the idea is to get centered with yourself, but not to be self-centered, if that makes any sense. And I teach a little bit of things of advice, things I've learned about life. I try to incorporate the cognitive behavioral therapy in the neurolinguistic program, because one of the things I really like to do here is teach people like the two sides of the things we're looking at that are the same. Science and spirit, they're not that far away from each other. They just use really different words. You know what I mean? Like, science is literally looking for something called the God particle. If people don't think that science is not looking for the source, like, come on, and it's very clear to me that science is. And actually, up until the last, I'd say 70 years, pretty much all science was, I don't want to say it was based from spirituality, but spirituality was a huge pusher of a lot of scientists looking for something. And if you look further back into history, like Einstein believed in God, so did Tesla, all these types of big names that are in our faces all the time. Like, they were driven by the idea that there's source. What is source? And a lot of them prayed, a lot of them believed in a God of some sort or a religion of some sort, right? So, so I think spirituality, my goal in life is to teach people that, like, religion is their self, and that the connection they make with themselves through true self-care is, part of how they connect to what is bigger than themselves and to humans and things like that. And I think self-care is misunderstood greatly. I think there's people in the world that think doing a face mask is self-care, but self-care has 7 components. There's emotional, spiritual, mental, physical, which is your body, recreational, social, and I'm missing one, and I can't think of it off the top of my head, but you sort of have to, like, encompass these 7 different things to make a self-care routine. And it seems like a lot of people miss out on, a core element of that, and then they wonder why they're not happy or they're not progressing or whatever. And it's usually because they're missing a whole part of themselves, So I think if we just get back to ourselves, we'll probably find ourselves in a better place and a better connection. And I think connecting to yourself makes the most sense. So, like, you're here, you're stuck in this body, so you have to get to know the two-way street here, and then the two-way street out here will progress a lot easier. I hope that makes sense.
You were saying you were a deep advocate for self-care and mental health. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, self-care and mental health, I think, are essentially one in one. Your whole life comes from behind your eyes, this beautiful computer that exists here, this brain, like, that's where your life is perceived from, it's seen from, it's, the information is collecting into your brain. So, so many people will be like, oh, I'm having, a mental health problem, but maybe they're not. They might just be frustrated and they use the words wrong. And that's something also that I try to teach people is, like, using your language to identify your self-care matters. So if you have a tendency to say hate all the time, I hate this, I hate that, I hate this, I hate that, you're probably pretty grumpy. And you can eradicate 90% of that just by learning to stop saying, I hate everything. And that is a form of self-care. And people think I'm nuts when I say that to them, but it's part of programming yourself. Your subconscious can hear everything that you say. So if you always say, I'm fat and stupid, or I'm so good at this, that's probably the result that you'll get. So Kanye West is actually one of my favorite examples. He always says, I'm the best, I'm the best, I'm the best. And people say he's so cocky, he's so this, he's so that, but goal is accomplished, is it not? He has the $1 billion, he has the businesses he wanted, he did the music he wanted, so he is the best because he's allowed himself to believe that, right? In my own case, in my own life, when I was doing drugs and stuff, I thought that was normal and I didn't think I was worthy of more, so I would think that to myself. Like, it doesn't matter if I get off drugs or not, it's not going to change anything in my life, and I believed that. So my life went that way. So mental health is, like, I think probably the biggest part of your whole self-care because it encompasses all the rest of the other things. Like, your mental health being key will encompass your emotional and your spiritual health. It'll help you have a better relationship with your body. It'll make you more creative and want to do recreational things and social things, you know. So mental health is key. And I wish we didn't use the term mental illness as much, because I don't think that many people are ill so much as they just haven't figured out how to cope, or maybe have never learned how to cope. And they're sort of just doing what they can do, which is the best they can do in all cases, you know. But if you don't know, if you don't have the resources, you can't get better, right? So. Yeah.
This is the finale of the interview, and I call this section the penalty box. And I'm just going to shoot quick questions at you, and you answer them as best you can. Dogs or cats?
Cats.
Favorite TV show?
Star Trek, Deep Space Nine.
Favorite book?
Ooh, Robert Greene, 48 Laws of Power.
Favorite musical artist?
Gary Clark Jr.
Favorite form of social media?
Instagram.
Your favorite toy growing up?
My blankie.
If you had to choose a last meal, what would it be?
Oh my god, a buffet.
What's your favorite sport?
Swimming.
Would you rather live in LA or New York?
Oh my god, neither, but if I had to choose LA.
And sweet or salty?
Sweet.
And favorite sports star?
Serena Williams. I like her. She does a lot of cool things. It's not just sports. I like that she sort of is like, she's a strong woman, you know, and she shows that off, and she's like been a mom and a tennis star. Like she's cool.
Having me introduce you, Sam.
Thank you so much, Marty. It was a pleasure. I can't wait to see your YouTube show. Everybody should subscribe. Thank you so much. Also, Bassy, Ottawa company. Have a great day.